There he is. He's back again. I can't keep this man away. It's Mitch Gallo, the host of the pre- and post-game show covering the Montreal Canadiens on the daily on your home for the Habs, TSN 690. Mitch Gallo, good to see you, brother. How's it going?
Hey, what's going on? Glad to be back.
Yeah, man. Good stuff. Lots of good reaction in terms of some of the back and forth we had in your first appearance. But here we are again in the aftermath of. Let's start with the Montreal Canadiens' 5-game homestand. Last week, I was talking about the importance of how the Montreal Canadiens would look competitively speaking. Were they going to pass the eye test? Because my understanding, considering the Montreal Canadiens have been at the bottom of the division, near the bottom of the standings, right? And they're still there despite their kind of humbling success in the 5-game homestand that is 3 games deep, as Mitch and I are talking about it here. Let's start with why the Montreal Canadiens, in my view, Mitch, just look better. We can go over quickly some of the victories. They beat the Patrik Laine-led New York Islanders in a 2-1 final. Sam Montembeault shuts down Nashville after they played in Toronto and lost the night before in a 3-0 final. Canadians getting comfortable in low-scoring, closer games. So let's start with why they've looked much better in the last 3 games at home.
Well, I think, for starters, we can't diminish the importance of Patrik Laine's presence in the lineup. He has provided the Canadiens with the ability to actually roll 4 lines at you because, Suzuki and Caulfield are both having statistically great seasons. I know we can debate Suzuki's play as a collective, but statistically he's been really, really strong, well over a point a game now, as we're 26 games into the season, and Caulfield's been scoring, so that line's been good. Dvorak, Gallagher, and Anderson has been very consistent. Jake Evans has been one of the more surprising players for the Canadiens on that 4th line now with Heineman and Armia. So Patrik Laine has allowed the Canadiens at least to be able to roll 4 lines playing with Kirby Dach and Uri Slafkovsky. Now we could get into Dach and Slafkovsky a little bit later because I know their games both leave something to be desired right now, but at least you don't feel like when those guys go out over the boards that a big nothing is going to happen on the ice. So I think that's a big factor. And then, you add in the fact that you talk about the Nashville game, 3-0. Well, 5-on-3 at the beginning of that game looked awful. Awful, awful, awful. And then Patrik Laine decided to rip a puck. And it's a goal. And in the stats column, it counts as a power play goal. The 5-on-3 looked brutal. And if Patrik Laine isn't there, they don't score that goal. They don't go up 2-0. And the complexion of the third period is completely different. So I think that makes a big, big difference. And all in all, I think it's also resulted in a lot more confidence in the play of the Canadiens, having a Patrik Laine, having that star power, feeding off what he's been able to provide. And they've also cleaned up a lot of things inside their own zone. So I think you have to give them credit for that as well. They've made adjustments here. And I think more so than anything else, it's a confidence thing. And they're a much more confident group because Patrik Laine is now part of their squad.
And I think it's a good point you bring up, the ability for Martin St. Louis to roll 4 lines with confidence, as opposed to perhaps needing to shorten his bench depending on the situation. As the game unfolds, does the bench get shortened? You can throw out a second line, despite the fact that Kirby Dach, again, remains a very interesting hot-button issue for me personally, and we'll get into him certainly. But the effect of Patrik Laine, I mean, his first goal, as you described it, right? I think the image of Cole Caulfield hugging him from behind with a bigger, more excitable smile. You know what I thought about? I thought about Patrik Laine's time in Winnipeg, and maybe that's an underreported story, Dustin Byfuglien, Patrik Laine. I don't know what happened there, really. Maybe there's something there. Columbus obviously didn't go according to plan. Almost a year later, was it 355 days to the day he last played an NHL game for Columbus in December. There he was out there scoring a goal, the excitement from his teammates. Like, my impression without being around the team, I mean, you're in the Bell Center on an every game basis. I get the sense that this is a pretty tight room, that these guys actually like each other, even in the face of adversity. And they've been dealt a lot of adversity, and I think they're still together. They look that part to me. What do you think about that?
Well, with the examples that you provided with his previous stints, Patrik Laine is a different dude. All right, just take a look at the suits that he's worn to the Bell Center when they show him in the parking garage.
I love him.
Listen to him in interviews. Right, he's different. He's one of those guys. He marches to the beat of his own drum. That's who Patrik Laine is. And Shaun, you also know hockey culture
Right.
and how a lot of hockey players are, especially that previous generation. Like you bring up Dustin Byfuglien. Dustin Byfuglien's been out of the NHL for how long now? Who else was part of that group? A Blake Wheeler, another old player, old school player coming from a different generation. I mean, those guys had trouble with Evander Kane too, right? But
Fair.
Evander
Yeah.
Kane seems to be accepted. And I know Evander Kane's had issues in other spots, but he seems to be well accepted in Edmonton because Evander Kane helps Edmonton win. And Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl know that. And while I believe the room is tight with the Canadiens, I don't disagree with you whatsoever, especially being in the building. I do think they're a tight group, but I also think they look at that guy and they say, that guy does something that we don't have, and he can help us win hockey games. And as a group where we're at, there's nothing that's more important than that. So we love him because he's going to help us get to where we want to go. He's a piece that we need. So I think that's it more than anything else. And I also think, you look at the Canadiens as a group compared to what I talked about with Winnipeg. It's a young group. It's a young team. It's a team that's going to view things differently. It's a team that's going to be more accepting, maybe to a personality type like a Patrik Laine compared to his stops in Winnipeg and Columbus.
So the Montreal Canadiens open up the first 3 games of their 5-game homestand that concludes coming up on Monday night with a game against a team right around them, competitively speaking, the Anaheim Ducks, and then it ends on Thursday, and then they're off on the road. And yes, tougher games are not too far away, and that's why we identified this kind of soft spot in the schedule. So let's react to the Montreal Canadiens building up. And listen, I'll be honest, when I looked at the schedule for this week and I was kind of planning around why I thought this week was important, and I looked at the games against the New York Islanders, I looked at Nashville, and I even looked at Washington. And I mean, what a cupcake, what a gift from the hockey gods that seemingly almost every team had played the night before and then was coming to Montreal to play the very next night. It happened to Nashville. It happened to Washington, right? Nashville loses, Washington goes to Toronto and wins with their backup, comes with Logan Thompson, and they erase a 2-goal lead. I was surprised for a few different things. How Montreal took it to Washington again, grab an early 2-0 lead. Cole Caulfield scores his 17th of the season. What happened after that? It seems like if there's one thing, while the Canadiens we can acknowledge are building better habits, they're still, yes, as Gallo alluded to, a young team, a team that's still learning on the fly, learning how to finish. How many breakaways has this team had collectively in the last 2 games? What, 6, maybe 7? How many goals out of those 6 or 7? The answer is 0. So is Martin St. Louis right when he talks about how even in a game in which his team wins 3-0, it wasn't all rosy. It wasn't all sunshine and gummy bears. It was like, yeah, we had a good first half game, but what happened to the second half? What happened in Washington? Why did the Capitals come back? Why did the Canadiens let them come back from it and blow a 2-goal lead, losing 4-2 on a Saturday night?
Well, first of all, with the Nashville game, the 3-0 win, I thought the Canadiens were really good in the third period. I thought it was the perfect combination of not sitting back and letting the air team dictate play because they're trying to get back into it, but also
Didn't they do
not.
that in the first? They did that in the first too against Nashville.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a quieter first period for sure, but it was also not taking that like unnecessary risk to try to force something while you have the lead. It's like, no, if you're gonna beat us here, you're gonna have to do something special because we're not gonna beat ourselves. And I think that's something that in the past they would beat themselves with the lead in third periods or during moments in the game that would just simply get away from them. So I really liked top to bottom their game against Nashville. I never at any point felt as though Nashville was going to win that game. Now, if you want to go to Saturday's game against
Yes.
Washington, bit of a
Yeah.
different case here because I think it was simply the Canadiens running into a team that's better than them.
Mm-hmm.
You look at goal differential. Washington is top of the entire National Hockey League, I believe, plus 33 going into last night's game. And then with the 2-goal win to the final, you push that to plus 35 on the season. Washington is not the team that people expected them to be, and I think we have to start giving Washington a ton of credit and Spencer Carberry a ton of credit, and also Brian McClellan a ton of credit for bringing in 2 pieces on the back end, and Chychrun and Matt Roy who have fit in well. Pierre-Luc Dubois, that everybody questioned that move. He seems to fit nicely in Washington. They're a big, heavy team to play against, and they're deserving of the win. The back-to-back stuff, Yes, the stats will show us that you have a significant advantage in the second game of a back-to-back, especially if you're waiting on the other team. That said, going into last night's game, Washington had won 4 to 5 games played on back-to-back nights. So they're a team that it hasn't really affected this season, at least. So I take that into consideration. And then you mentioned it, like, all right, you can look at the shot clock, 18-7 in the final frame. Fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, shots is one thing. Let's talk a little bit about scoring chances here. The Canadiens had 4 freaking breakaways in that third period alone. I don't remember, Shaun, the last time I was at a game where I saw 4 breakaways in one period. They
Well,
did-
wasn't it 3 against Nashville?
they didn't score. I think
Yeah.
it was 3 in the game against Nashville, but not 4 in a period.
Yeah,
4
yeah,
in
yeah.
one period. It was 5 total
Well,
in
I
the
think
game
about
last night.
the David Savard speed burst, Cole Caulfield,
Yeah,
Justin Barron with, I think, more time than he knew what to do with. Like, he was so shocked in that Nashville game how much time and space he had. But yeah, I mean, quickly, since you bring up the breakaways and the lack of finish, didn't they go 0 for all of those chances over
Yes,
2 games?
it was over. But the point is, in the third period, you
Yeah.
talk about the 18-7 in shots. I'll take 4 breakaways over 18 shots on goal. And the Canadiens had 4 breakaways. They didn't convert. And for me, the big one is Suzuki. Suzuki's got to score there. Suzuki scores on his breakaway. That's the game. Canadiens win. They get 2 points in the standings.
That's fair.
Bit of an awkward situation. You have a right-hand catch goalie, right-hand shot coming in on him. Suzuki very used to trying to pull the goalie to the left and then flip the puck to the right, but instead, because of the handness of the goaltender catching right, he goes to the backhand. Thompson makes the save. Suzuki scores there. Game over. Canadiens win. He doesn't. That's hockey.